Hey guys and gals, welcome back to the next lesson in our regular maintenance course. We're going to be focusing on the proper care and maintenance of diatomaceous earth or DE filters. These filters are highly efficient at trapping debris and dirt, but they require regular maintenance to stay effective. Today, we'll walk you through the steps for backwashing DE filters and breaking them down for a thorough cleaning. DE filters use a natural substance called diatomaceous earth as a filter medium. This fine powder captures particles as small as 5 microns, providing very clear water. Maintaining these filters involves 2 key processes: backwashing once per month, which cleans out the accumulated debris, and periodically every 6 months, breaking down the filter for a comprehensive cleaning. Backwashing is a routine maintenance procedure that should be performed regularly to ensure optimal performance of your DE filter. It should be done about once a month. I typically just do it the first week of every month. But you may notice if you have a lot of particulates or dirt in your pool, if your DE filter is working overtime, and you notice your pressure rising over 10 psi, you may need to backwash sooner. Or if it's an algae treat and you have an algae bloom, you may need to backwash sooner as well. Typically, I'll shock the pool heavily if there's a bunch of algae and backwash the next day. And you may need to backwash multiple times depending on how dirty your pool is. Just backwash and monitor that PSI to make sure it's not going too high. Anyways, here's how to do it effectively. First, you're going to turn off the pump. And always remember this step: you cannot move this multi-port valve or push-pull valve if you have one while the pump is running. The difference in pressure can cause catastrophic failure of equipment. So what you want to do is turn it off, adjust the valve to the backwash position. This reverses the flow of the water through the filter, pushing out trapped dirt and debris. When you turn the filter back on, while it's in backwash mode, you should see the sight glass start to fill with dirty DE powder. When it starts to clear up, you'll know that backwashing is complete. What you'll do then is turn the pump off, set it to rinse, and then turn the filter pump back on. This helps to settle the DE and remove any remaining debris in the lines. Then, I like to do a thorough backwash by putting it back into backwash and repeating the first 2 steps 2 additional times. So you'll actually be backwashing 3 times and rinsing 3 times before putting it back into filter. Always remember to turn the pump off before moving the valve. Then, once backwashing and rinsing are complete, it's necessary to add the new DE powder to the skimmer to replace what was lost. This ensures your filter continues to perform efficiently. With these orange Super Pro scoops, they are 1 pound measured scoops. You'll be able to accurately measure exactly how much DE you'll be adding into the skimmer. You can check the filter sticker on the side of your filter to see what size your filter is. It'll usually have a hole punch out on the size, and that'll tell you how many pounds of DE you need to add. It's also important to note that every time you backwash, you won't be adding the full amount of DE into your filter. You'll be adding just about a half a pound less. So if you've just cleaned your filter and it's a 60 square foot grid, you'll only be adding about 5.5 pounds after the first backwash, and so on and so forth. That's why it's important to keep records of when you clean your filter, when you backwash, what you add, and so forth. Always keep a log of what you're doing to your pool at all times.
Hey there! Just popping in for a quick moment. I wanted to take the chance to personally thank you for watching this lesson from my online course, Pool School. If you're finding this helpful so far, make sure to grab our free pool care cheat sheet. It's packed with tips and everything you need to keep your pool blue, clear, all year round, and it's linked in the description down below. Also, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you can stay up to date with all of the tips and tricks and other lessons I have planned for this channel. Let's get back to the lesson.
At least once a season or as needed, you should thoroughly break down your DE filter for cleaning. It's typically about every 6 months, or if you're having to backwash more than 1 time per month. If you're noticing every other week you have to backwash, it's time to break it down and clean the filter. It's also good to backwash the filter before disassembly. And in cleaning your filter, this process involves turning off the pump and draining the filter. So you'll make sure that the system is completely powered down. Then open the air relief valve so the air begins to equalize the water within the filter tank. After you no longer hear air being sucked down, it's safe to open up the filter. Depending on the brand of your filter, you'll likely use a 9/16 for a Jandy, a 3/4 inch for a Hayward filter, or a 7/8 inch for a Pentair filter. I like to use an impact, can use a socket wrench. Either which way, it'll be fine. Carefully remove the spring barrel nut assembly by rotating it counterclockwise. Once the nut and spring are removed, you can carefully remove the filter band. Be careful, as sometimes if you have an older filter, it's going to be covered in fiberglass because it is a fiberglass shell. Wear gloves if you need to. Once you remove the top shell, then you will find the DE filter in all of its glory. I know you're probably thinking, what is this? Well, it's a standpipe connected to a manifold. Then you have 2 wing nuts or 1/2-inch nuts on top, potentially a single nut in the middle, but you'll want to remove the nuts. And then after you've removed the nuts connecting the top manifold to the bottom manifold, you'll want to grab it by the 2 edges where it literally says pull here. Then you'll jiggle it on a horizontal plane and lift up as you're jiggling to remove the manifold from the standpipe. If you try to just lift up, you're going to throw your back out. So after you get the manifold off of the standpipe, inspect the manifold for any cracks, as any cracks will cause DE to pass and the filter will not work properly. If you have cracks, you will need to replace the manifold. It's typically called a top manifold for whatever model number your DE filter is. If there's no cracks, you're good to go. Then you'll begin to remove each grid one by one and flip them upside down and line them along your fence so you can use your high pressure nozzle to begin spraying down the grids. And as you're spraying all of the grids down, try to knock off all of the DE. Make sure you get the left and the right edges of all of the grids, and then you flip them around and do the back side of all the grids. Inspect the grids for holes or tears, or if there's too many collapsed ribs inside of the filter grids, you may need to replace them. These are very cheap to buy on Amazon. There are 8 grids. They're about 25 bucks a piece, so grab some if you need them. After all of the grids are completely clean, it's time to take the drain plug out and clean the tank. If you have an older filter, you may want to just scoop out the additional DE that's at the bottom of the filter rather than taking the drain plug out. What'll happen is these older filters will have dry rotted drain plugs. They could potentially crack the tank, or the drain plug could just disintegrate in your hands when you're trying to take it out. So be very careful if you have an older filter. Make sure you clean out the threads of the drain plug when you get it out. There will likely be calcium buildup on the drain plug, so clean it out using your fingernail or a knife. Either will do. Also make sure the O-ring that's at the top of the drain plug is clean, because that's where your seal is. And after you spray out the tank, make sure that you also spray the seat where the filter tank O-ring sits. It's very important to take your nozzle, go around in a circle around that O-ring to make sure all that dirt gets out from under there. If there's any rocks or anything like that, it could cause a leak whenever you tighten the band again. So make sure if you need to, you can take it off and inspect it to make sure it's clean. Make sure that seat is clean. And once the tank is clean, the O-ring seat is clean, and the drain plug is back in the filter tank, then we can begin reassembly. It may look very confusing at first, but I promise to try to explain this as best as I can, given the current circumstance of me being on one side of a microphone and you being on the other side of a screen. So what you'll do is you'll lay the bottom manifold flat and make sure that the V section is facing towards you. That's where the standpipe will need to go and sit in between all of the grids. So once you have the V section facing you, you can begin attaching the grids. Make sure to keep it on a level ground. It is much easier to work with when the grids will sit by themselves. You'll see the V right here, and you'll set the grid down. Typically, the bottom manifold will have a circle section where the middle of the rib will sit. You can kind of follow the pattern. Pretty simple to follow once you look at it, and you can see, okay, that's how the grids go. You'll see you want to leave a space for the standpipe to stand straight up in between that first grid, and you'll start at one end and work your way around all the way to make a spiral pattern. But after you fix the first grid in place, you'll then want to grab the second grid and put it right here on the second notch. But you'll go one back. You'll kind of see it once you start putting it together. Just try to follow exactly how I'm doing it. That way you can see exactly how I'm setting these grids on this manifold. Once you get it down the first 2 or 3 times, it's going to be super easy after that. It can be a little confusing at first. Make sure that all of these are lining properly. You'll set the grid down upon the bottom manifold. Be a little tricky to line up, especially if you have new grids. Keep making your way around the circle, setting the grids in a spiral-like pattern, originating in the middle. You'll see you'll have to have all the grids with the white circles facing up, because that's what's going to plug into your manifold. As you go all the way around, you'll have a partial grid, which is the smaller grid out of all of the 8 grids. You're going to have 7 full-size grids and 1 partial grid. And that partial grid will line up with the first grid that you put on. As you can tell, there is a spiral pattern here. What you can do is buy these awesome little filter templates for DE filters. They're really great and they'll help you get this manifold on there properly and quickly. Otherwise, it can be a pain to try to line this up. Take the filter template, put it on all of the white circles, and in between each and every grid, it should be spaced evenly. As you're lining it up, you'll put the 2 studs through the manifold, and then the tricky part is getting all of the grids to line up into the manifold, and you'll just kind of wiggle each grid and go around in a circle to make sure it all lines up properly. You don't want any space in between the top of the grid and the bottom of the manifold. You'll want to tighten up these wing nuts and go around pushing on each section. There's going to be 4 sections of 2. You'll go around each section, pushing down and tighten the wing nuts as you go, and just move around in a circle, and you'll see it kind of tighten down, and now you're ready to pick it up and set it back into the filter and the manifold onto the standpipe. Use some lube on that standpipe O-ring to help you get the manifold down on there easily. And you'll wiggle it down, making sure that it's seated properly. After that, make sure that you have your filter tank O-ring cleaned off and seated properly on the O-ring seat of the filter tank. Then you'll set the top of the filter back on there, get your drain plug, make sure that that's back in there and tightened up, and then you'll attach the band of the filter with the spring barrel nut assembly. Very carefully start it by hand so you don't cross thread the threads inside of the filter bolt. Once you've got it hand started and a decent amount screwed in, you can begin using your socket wrench or the impact wrench. Tighten until the springs touch, or if you have a Hayward filter, you're going to tighten with a 16-inch gap. With the Jandy filter, it'll be the same amount of gap. Once it's tightened, you're ready to start the filter pump again and open the air relief valve to relieve any pressure until water is flowing out of the air relief valve. Shut it, make sure to check for any leaks, and if there aren't any, you're all done and you're ready to go. And that's how you clean a DE filter. Thank you so much for joining me on this lesson. In our next lesson, we're going to be learning more about keeping your pool in tip-top shape. See you in the next lesson.